Greetings, everyone. Tekking and Barry here, and I have upgraded my wardrobe, or perhaps downgraded my wardrobe. I'm not really sure. It's a matter of perspective. I'm trying out this long sleeve polo thing. I like it. I think it looks cool. I got the idea from Bertolt from Attack on Titan. So in case you're curious where Tekking gets his fashion ideas from, anime characters. And we're not even talking about Bertolt's series today. Although, given what's happening right now in Attack on Titan with Season 4 of the anime, as well as where the manga's at, I should probably make a video on Attack on Titan at some point. But no, today is January 14th, and we are talking about Dr. Stone today, because Season 2, Episode 1 was released today. I watched it earlier on Crunchyroll. Really good start to the new season. I'm really excited for this one. And this was great. This was something that I kind of forgot, like, when it was going to air. I forgot the date. I knew it was going to be early 2021, but it just kind of escaped me for a while. And then, like, last week, I was sitting around just thinking, man, Dr. Stone Season 2 should be airing soon, and I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, it's airing next week! It's one of the best feelings ever when it's like, hey, when's the next season of this really popular show that I love going to come out? Oh, like 2 days from now. Awesome, great. Okay, so that's probably where spoilers are going to end, because I really want to talk about where Season 2 is probably going to go to, like where we're going to end Season 2, what my thoughts on Season 2 are, and for that reason, we're going to get into manga spoilers, and considering I'm already here talking about Dr. Stone, I need to talk about what just recently happened in the manga of Dr. Stone, because that was... yeah, okay. So, that's the spoiler-free section of the video. That was about, like, less than 2 minutes, so thank you for stopping by. In case you don't want to be spoiled, I would suggest you leave. But if not, okay, let's get into this. Let's talk about Season 2 first, okay? So, Season 1 ended at kind of a precarious location, in the anime. I was actually really surprised. I thought Season 1 of Dr. Stone was going to just basically end right at the end of the Ishigami Village arc, and then all of Season 2 was just going to be Stone Wars. I thought that was the way it was going to go, and then the anime surprised me. It's like halfway through, it was like, no, we're diving right into the Stone Wars arc, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, great. And I just assumed, like, well, since we're starting Stone Wars, it would be weird to stop right in the middle, right? As like, well, that's what they did. And to be fair, it's not such a weird spot to end it, because there's a lot of, like, preliminary battles for the Stone Wars arc, and then the whole building of the cell phone. Like, that's part 1 of just getting the cell phone made, and then part 2 is the final battle utilizing the cell phone, and then with Taiju and Yuzuriha and everybody, and, you know, getting Nikki involved in all this, Ukyo and everybody, and, like, meeting everyone. Yo is there, and then there's the final big battle with Tsukasa and Hyoga, okay? So, it made sense where it ended it out. In the last episode of Season 1, because I knew it was coming out today, I binge-watched, like, the last, 6 episodes of Dr. Stone Season 1 last night, and it ended on such a really good note there, with them playing the record and listening to Lillian's song and everything. So I'm like, that's probably the best way that you could have ended Season 1 there, on that location. But, it does mean that we're literally starting off Season 2 with the final battle, essentially. Like, I don't know how many episodes it's gonna go for, but you gotta get, everything set up with the phone and everything. There's a few more things that need to be crafted. I love the chapter where they make the paper shields. That was really cool, so I can't wait to see that, where they make the shields and everything, and there's a few more things that need to be done, of course, back and forth and everything, recruiting allies, like the whole thing they do with Nikki, when Senku and Gen have to, like, mimic Lillian and have to, like, come up with all this stuff. What are Lillian's 3 sizes? And Gen has to be like, and Senku's, like, doing, like, calculations, trying to figure out Lillian's body measurements and stuff. So that's funny. I'm looking forward to that kind of stuff, that kind of comedy. But then we got the final big battle, and that's probably going to happen probably at some point, like, where the Village Games arc happened in the last season, okay? And so then after that, I'm thinking, all right, well, how are we going to do this? Are we going to just do the rest of Stone Wars? You could probably honestly get it done in even less episodes than that, because I think the Village Games arc was only, like, episode 12, 13, they rounded that out. So you might be able to end Stone Wars even earlier than that, and then you have the arc where they awaken Ryusui and Francois. I am so sorry, by the way. I am so sorry, because I thought for so long this word was pronounced Francos. And here's the thing. I've heard Francois before. I know that's a French name. It's just that I never saw it written out my entire life. Or maybe I did, I just don't remember. But I feel like such an idiot, because I'm like, oh yeah, Francois, that's a French name. I've heard it said many, many, many times in my life. And I look at this and I'm like, oh, Francos. Yeah, that's how you pronounce that. I apologize to everybody from France, everybody in the world. I apologize for that. But that's the arc where they awaken Ryusui and Francois, and then they start getting into like the production of bread, making the hot air balloon, getting the money and all that stuff, and making the boat. So is season 2 going to be the remainder of Stone Wars, the final battle, and then the remainder of it after that is just going to be building the boat, and then season 2 is going to end with them heading off, and then season 3 is all going to be Treasure Island? I don't know. I feel like you could maybe fit Treasure Island into this. I feel like you could. I just kind of want them to be speeding along because, like, with the arc we're in right now in the manga, where we're, like, globetrotting all over the world trying to build up the cities and everything, I would like to see that animated sooner rather than later. So, of course, you know, it's like, okay, season 2, Stone Wars, and then building the ship, and then season 3 is mostly the island, and then season 4 we finally get to that. I don't know. It's just, Dr. Stone has gotten so good. I mean, it's always been good, but it's gotten so good in these last few arcs when they're actually trying to, like, they're actually leaving Japan now, and they're traveling the world, and with the big mystery in South America where we're at right now, I'm getting to it. Hold on, I'm getting to it. I'm really pumped, all right? But I don't know. I actually didn't look up how many episodes are going to be in season 2. You think that I should have looked that up before I did this? You know what? Hold on. Let me look that up right now. I'm sorry. I'm unprepared. Hold on. I was too busy putting the polo shirt underneath the long sleeves. Hold on. Okay, so I just did a really quick search. I just checked Google and like Wikipedia and all the obvious sources and stuff. Couldn't find an episode number for season 2. So if you have one, confirm it with like a source and everything, let me know. But from what I see, I can't really find like a definitive, like there will be 24 episodes in season 2. That's usually like a standard, and that's, you know, roughly how many episodes we got in season 1, but I just don't know. So maybe we could. That kind of gives me a little bit of hope. Maybe we could go Stone Wars and then the shipbuilding arc, and then we do the island, the Treasure Island adventure, and then we could do all that in season 2. I think it could work, personally, but we'll see where that goes. Okay, so the last chapter of Dr. Stone now. I gotta talk about that because this has literally been the thing we've been waiting for since, well, not since day one. I mean, day one, we've always been curious about where exactly the petrification light came from, but I was excited ever since we found out about Byakuya and everybody, like when we found out about the astronauts, and Byakuya just had that one line when he was up there, when all the astronauts were kind of studying the Earth and trying to figure out what the hell just happened. They were like, the light originated somewhere in South America. And so, obviously, at that point, there was really nothing the astronauts could do, and at that point, there was nothing Senku could do, but that at least set up, like, okay, so that's gonna be maybe one of our end games. Of course, now we know the end game is essentially the moon, but South America is definitely a place we have to go at some point, so to see exactly what originated this, okay? And I gotta say, when I first heard South America, what I pictured what was going to happen in Dr. Stone was that, and this doesn't really follow the scientific theme of the show, but that's something I kind of wanted to see, sort of like, okay, what if deep in the bowels of South America, there was like a temple or something, right? And then there was like an ancient artifact, like something from Indiana Jones, and somebody like stole the artifact or did something wrong with the temple or something, and like some mystical magic or something caused the petrification wave across the planet and everyone's frozen. And then it's going to be up to Senku to defeat literal magic with science! That's kind of where I thought it was going. Like, they were gonna find a temple, and it's like, oh, that's the origin of the petrification ray. Well, that's gonna be interesting. And then, like, the last hurdle that Senku's gonna have to do is like, oh, this is actual magic. Time to science the crap out of this, you know? That was an interesting way you could take it, but of course the whole theme of Dr. Stone is like magic doesn't exist and that everything can be explained through scientific means. Like, that's the big theme, right? There was even a moment, I think, where Senku, I think it was during the Treasure Island arc, when he explained, like, you know, honestly, if the petrification ray did turn out to be straight up magic, there's nothing I really could have done about that because it doesn't operate, because like just by the fact it would be magic means that, you know, everything that makes science a thing, like repeatability and everything, like if magic is literally just this thing that applies to no laws of physics or anything that we know of, like it has an infinite energy source, or it doesn't follow the laws of gravity or anything like that, it's just literal magic, it operates outside of science, there's nothing I could really do there. But since they found out the Medusa, the petrification device, is 100% science, and it was built very advanced technology, but still technology, still science, Senku's like, oh, good. I was kind of a little worried it might have been legit magic, and if it was, that would have been a problem. But no, this is science. We can crack this nugget. We can figure this out, right? Okay. So, and then they awoke Joel, the clockmaker, and everybody, and they're working on that. They're trying to figure out what's going on with the exact mechanism of the petrification device. So they have somebody that's like good at like intricate work like that. But then at the end of the last chapter, they finally reach the point in the middle of the Amazon where the petrification ray originated from. And I wasn't right, but I wasn't completely far off either, I wasn't right in that it's like, oh, it's straight up magic, but the whole temple in the middle of South America thing, I was kind of right on that, sort of. We gotta see where it goes from here, but at any rate, they're exploring the Amazon rainforest, and right in the center of it, right down the river, the Amazon River, they find this stepped pyramid in the middle of the jungle, out in the middle of nowhere. And this pyramid's been here for, well, at least since the petrification device happened. And from what we can see, the entire pyramid is either covered with the Medusas or is made out of the Medusas. I'll get to that in a second. But they arrive down the river, and honestly, this is what I thought was going to happen. So I'm reading the chapter, and before we got to the end of the chapter, the big twist, I'm like, okay, then Suika finds the one Medusa in the river, and she's like, oh, wow, that's so lucky. And I'm like, oh, they're gonna look up, and there's gonna be, I was thinking maybe a few dozen. I was thinking, oh, man, there's gonna be dozens of Medusas probably in the trees and, like, laying around the riverbed and, like, on the shore and everything. There's probably gonna be dozens, maybe hundreds of these things. And then it pans up to see the giant freaking pyramid made just glistening of these things. And I'm just sitting there like, why, man, don't fuck around, really, seriously, wow, that was crazy. And then Gen with that line, I love it. It's just like, it's so sickeningly beautiful, but with malice. Like they see this thing, because it's like they're literally trekking through the middle of the damn Amazon, and then they find the pyramid. The petrification device, I'm assuming, is green, because it's green light. I always pictured the device itself as also green. I think we've seen it in color pages before. The petrification device is green. So just imagine walking through the Amazon and then finding this shining emerald pyramid in the middle of nowhere. That would be a beautiful sight to behold. And Gen mentions that, but he's also like, it's so beautiful, it's sickeningly beautiful with malice. Because they know what these things do, and what the Y-Man did, he petrified all of humanity with this just ridiculous number of petrification devices, all at the same location, all detonated at the same time. So it looks cool, but it's horrible what it actually means, okay? So what do you guys think? Do you think the pyramid is just covered with these things, or it's made out of these things? I think it's made out of these things. Because here's the thing. I did a little bit of research on this, because it's a stepped pyramid, right? And I'm like, okay, the Incans lived in South America back in the day, right? That was the Incan Empire, right? And their capital was Cuzco. If you don't know anything about the Incas, don't worry, I just did some quick research on them as well. I always do more research on the Aztecs. The Aztecs were always my favorite, like, Mesoamerican. That's more in Mexico. That's further north. The Mayans and the Aztecs were more in, like, central Mexico. In fact, the capital of the Aztec Empire, Tenochtitlan, is now modern-day Mexico City. Okay, so that's further north, right? So I was like, okay, but the Incans are down in South America, and if you don't know anything about the Incas, go watch The Emperor's New Groove, because that's what the basis for that is. So there you go. But anyway, the Incas never, I don't think, made it that far into the Amazon rainforest. At least their civilization didn't, because, like, even Senku mentions in the last chapter, there's so many things that can kill you in the Amazon. And not even just, like, piranhas or whatever, like the obvious, like, snakes, giant snakes that attack you. Tsukasa just slices up a damn snake in the last chapter. Snakes are not the most dangerous. Piranhas are not the most dangerous in the Amazon. Senku mentions there are so many bugs and parasites and leeches that will just kill you or make you so sick you will die. And then the army ant. I'm so happy they mentioned the army ant. Army ants are terrifying. Go watch some documentaries on them. Even Gen kind of mentions, oh yeah, I saw a documentary on those things once. They're terrifying. Yeah, they are. They are. They are a single hive mind, a colony that will just attack even somewhat, like even larger mammals, you know? So if you're just walking through the freaking Amazon rainforest, like strumbly bum bum bum, these things, you step into a nest of these things, you will be devoured. You will just be consumed by like thousands of these things operating on a single hive mind that will just shred you. All right, so I'm like, there's all these horrible things in the Amazon. It's hard enough to navigate even with our modern technology. Imagine what it must have been like for the Incas living back. I think the Incan Empire was conquered by Spain in like the late 16th century, and I think it started rising to prominence during the 12th century. I mean, there were civilizations that existed before that that kind of served as like a stepping stone for what would become the great Incan Empire. But that was mostly on the shore, where Chile and I think it made as far north as Colombia, Peru, I think a little bit into Argentina. You know, it was more on the western coast of South America. They couldn't really, the idea that Incans were building like pyramids in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, not very feasible given all of the dangers that existed. I mean, maybe it did happen, but from what I understand, it did not. They were mostly on the western coast of the country, of the continent, because that's also where the ocean was and everything. A lot more, like, that's where the llamas live too, and llamas and alpacas were their pack animals back in the day, right? So I don't think it makes sense that this is like an ancient Incan temple from like, you know, 1300 AD or whatever that they found. I think it makes way more sense, and I don't know how the hell this is even feasible, because we're going to explain that later. It makes way more sense that Y-Man created just a giant cluster of these Medusas into one entity, like fused them all together into one thing, and then like Rita Repulsa just chucked it at the Earth, and then it hit the Earth, and then just boom! Or, I mean, chucking it at the Earth might be a little bit too dramatic, but something happened to get this temple right in the middle of the damn rainforest, right? Something had to happen. And we know the previous MO of Y-Man from what we saw at Treasure Island was throwing Medusas at the planet. We saw that with Matsukaze's backstory. Like, that's literally what happened. Like, the Medusas were just falling out of the sky and then detonating and turning everybody on the island into stone, right? Or at least most of the people. You know, they managed to survive. But yeah, so that seems to be what Y-Man does, take a bunch of Medusas and just throw them at the planet. I'm just a little curious about that, because Y-Man, like, this would be when humans were still around, like modern technology existed. I think we would notice, I think satellites and stuff would pick up if, like, hey, there's a large cluster of this weird metal objects being hurled from the moon, slamming into the Earth. Ah! So I don't know about that, but I think this thing is made out of the petrification devices, and just over the millennia, over the 3 millennia, the 3,700 years, a lot of these Medusas have fallen apart, and that's why they're kind of scattered all over the area. I think it was one big thing, and then just over the centuries, they've fallen down. They're in the soil. They're all over the place. They're in the water of the Amazon River. Either in the trees, in the ground. We even saw, when they were approaching, we saw like that plant. It was like trees or roots or whatever, but they were also petrified. So it's like, I don't know what the whole deal with that is, because it's stated that only like humans and swallows are affected by the petrification ray, but maybe like plant life can be affected by it as well if it's close enough to it. You know, because we saw like roots and stuff coming out of the ground that looked like they were still petrified. I mean, it might have just looked like that, but I'm interested in seeing what Senku and Dr. Zeno have to say about that, right? So, do these Medusas still function? I feel like a few still have to, right? Like, there's no shortage of batteries. The idea that Senku throws out, because Chrome mentions it. Chrome's like, hey, Senku, when we were at Treasure Island, you had that little trick where you began to be petrified, and then you threw the revival fluid up, and then it landed on you, and it negated the petrification. It stopped it halfway. So Chrome is like, well, why don't we just make a device to attach to ourselves, so like every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes or whatever, a single drop of nitric acid like drops on our flesh. So that way, even if we do get caught in the wave, 5 minutes later it like frees us. And Senku's like, yeah, that's not a bad idea, but let's imagine you were the Y-Man for a second, and you wanted to make damn sure that all 7 point whatever billion humans, the 7.7 billion human beings on the entire planet were petrified in one go. You wouldn't just throw one Medusa or two. You would make damn sure you would send a bunch firing at different times, not all at once, firing at different intervals over and over again. You also have to account for ones that are going to be maybe duds that aren't going to fire right. And so that's where they came up with the idea, like, oh, maybe there's a few dozen, maybe 100 or so. No, it quite literally millions. Like, you look at this pyramid, and I can't show you the image, unfortunately, but if you look at that pyramid, millions of these things, right, exist, and especially if it's made, even if it's just like covered in them, like the first layer or so of the rock is just the Medusas, you're still talking a crap ton. But if it's made out of them, millions, maybe even tens of millions of these Medusas, right? And that would be terrifying. Can you imagine being there, knowing what these things can do, and be like, oh man, we're screwed. If these things all detonate at once, we're done. We're just, you know? And there's enough here that keep going, yeah? So, yeah, I guess it's possible, very feasible, that first wave we saw at the beginning of the series, it you know, turned the world to stone, but that wasn't just one. Maybe, like 5 minutes later, another one fired, you know? Like, they all fired kind of, like, maybe seconds apart to make really sure. It was also explained, though, that one of those Medusas, just one of them, apparently, maybe at a full charge, has the potential to do a full global petrification, because that's what Y-Man started issuing the orders over the radio waves. Like, he was giving the diameter of the Earth and 1 second. So he was giving those orders out to just one of them or all of them. I'm not really sure how this is going to go, but if they have all that radio equipment on them, I would disconnect that crap. You know, it's like, disconnect all the radio equipment, everything, because if we're exploring this temple, if we're walking around and that radio wave goes out, is 12 million miles, I forget, it's not 12 million miles, the diameter of the Earth is all the way around, it's 25,000, I know the circumference is 25,000 miles, I forget, but whatever, how many meters, whatever the entire, diameter of the Earth is, if you're exploring that temple and all of a sudden, just blah, 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 1 second, oh crap, they all go off at once, so disconnect all that, make sure that's not a thing, yeah, make sure, I just realized something terrifying. So they could make sure that they disconnect everything, but what about Stanley's group? Stanley's group has radio equipment too, right? And so if they're in their plane, they're going to be able to spot that pyramid. That pyramid is literally made out of, even if it's not green, it's still a bunch of shiny metal. It's going to glisten like the damn sun. So, you know, they're going to be flying in the damn plane. They're going to see, hey, maybe they headed over to that giant glowing temple. I'm like, yeah, probably. And then they're going to go over there. They have radio equipment too. So if the Y-Man decides to make a surprise broadcast when they're exploring the temple or they're flying over it, and if just one of those Medusas, it could be a chain reaction effect. Like one Medusa triggers and then the other trigger, and it's just, it goes off and it goes crazy, right? So yeah. Now here's a question. One Medusa is one thing. Even the few dozen that we saw rain down on Treasure Island in the past, that's one thing. Y-Man has to have a giant production factory up there on the moon. There's no other way. It would be one thing if there's a moon base or something, a small little moon base, and maybe there's a robot, an AI or something that's making these things and chucking them at the Earth. But in order to make that freaking many of them, there has to be a huge factory on the moon at some point. You know, how did that happen? So that's a concern, right? But yeah, I just can't wait. I kind of hope, in a way, I think it is made out of them, but I kind of hope it isn't, so they can kind of go in and they can kind of explore it. But even so, I mean, I think they're going to be able to experiment with a few of these things. Maybe not necessarily experimenting with them right then and there, but at least collecting a few. And with Joel's intel, they now know where the battery is. Now, that might be a little difficult because Joel is an expert watchmaker, so he can open them up and he can take out, the little diamond used as power. I'm not sure. I mean, Senku is as long as Joel gives Senku perfect directions on what to do, and they have Kohaku there, and she's very delicate and everything, they should be able to remove the batteries. I think they could. So they could just scoop up a few Medusas and then pull out the batteries. I'm like, all right. And also keep in mind, these ones might have only fired a few times a few thousand years ago. The ones that were utilized by Y-Man at the Treasure Island, like the one they have right now in their possession, the one they got, that was fired a bunch of times, and it was overused over the decades by Ibarra and everybody, and they didn't have any way of recharging it. So these things' battery lives are insane, because Ibarra had that thing in his possession for like 20 years, and he used it quite a lot. And then during the final battle, they were using it to cover the entire island. So that drained the battery, but still, that battery and that Medusa, that lasted for 2 decades without being recharged, okay? At minimum 2 decades, probably a lot longer, because it arrived during Matsukaze's time. And then they all got fired off, and they destroyed a bunch of them, but they kept that original one. That thing probably is functional for at least a few centuries, right? And so if this is truly like super advanced technology beyond even the 21st century, having a battery life that long would definitely make sense, right? But yeah, going back to the event at the island with Matsukaze really quick, it's very clear from that event that the Y-Man is aware of what's going on the Earth, regardless of radio waves or anything. Because the people on Treasure Island, they didn't have radio technology or anything. Y-Man was still able to know they were there. So this is the deal. He sends down a bunch of these petrification devices, the Medusas, petrifies the entire planet, sends down the whole damn temple, right? And then, you know, Byakuya and all the astronauts, they come back down, they begin to repopulate and everything. Give it a few centuries when there's actual decent-sized population living on Treasure Island, Y-Man knows they're there. He looks down at night and he's like, maybe it's just, I don't know how he, like, binoculars, telescope, I don't know, but he can tell, like, there are people living on a tiny little island off the coast of Japan. Now, they probably didn't realize it right away, because they don't have any technology to send out waves, and they don't have, like, they're probably lighting fires and stuff, but seeing, like, even a large bonfire from the moon, I mean, that would be pretty hard, even with, like, you know, you have to be basically looking at the right place at the right time. And so maybe at some point, if Y-Man, you know, you did a scan of the Earth or something, like a few, like maybe because Matsukaze was turned to stone, I think it was a few centuries before this. So this is 3,700 years after the original event. Maybe Matsukaze's event with them raining down, maybe that happened like 3,200 years after, 3,300 years after, something like that. So it took a while for Y-Man to notice that there were humans. But the second he figured out there were humans living on that tiny little island, he's like, nope, 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 you know, no, you're supposed to stay rocks, you know, and then he's throwing them all down, right? And then when Zeno and Senku woke up, and they started coming up with the radio waves, and now you're broadcasting. Now you can detect it. Now Y-Man is like, oh, why do they keep coming back? And so maybe he has to come up with a new idea there. Y-Man he knows everything they're doing, probably. He probably knows what they're going to do next, and he knows they're going to go to South America. So, yeah, he might just be like, okay, tell you what, I'll just wait for them to all go down to South America, and when they get close to it, I'm just going to activate them all at once somehow. I hope, I mean, there's one thing, maybe he doesn't have a remote detonation on one of them, but on a cluster that large, I don't know. I don't know, but we'll see how this goes, right? Yeah. Kind of tricky on that one. I guess you couldn't do remote detonation because it's so far away. Like, if you're sending the signal from the moon to the Earth, it might be kind of tricky to do like a remote detonation, so that's why you have to do like the, you know, like 5 meters 1 second. Like, you have to actually verbally announce how long you want it to go for. So, yeah. But at any rate, Dr. Stone is getting really good, and we're getting a new chapter this week coming up, so I'm really excited for that. Season 2, I'm looking forward to all the great things we're going to get from that. Just wanted to do a Dr. Stone video today. So yeah, let me know on what you think about the petrification pyramid and what's going to happen with everything. Yeah, because the pieces are slowly being put together now, and so this is going to be a little tricky going forward. But they have no limit of batteries and petrification devices now, so that's something. Maybe Senku could come up with some idea, but we'll see where it goes. Anyway, Tekking and Barry signing out. Later, everyone.